Okay, my name's Jeff Waters. I play in a Canadian metal band, heavy metal thrash band called Annihilated, Annihilator, Anal Eater. Kids here. And I'm pretty crazy. I had too much German liquid cocaine coffee this morning. I don't drink alcohol, but I drink coffee really badly. And if there's any guitar players here, you're not going to learn anything at all. I'm going to try and get you to ask me questions so I don't have to play anything. I have no backing tracks. I just have my friend Fabio. Where is he? Is he gone?
Now you're lost.
I know why too. He saw a girl in hall number 10. So I really don't know what I'm doing, but thanks for coming out to this ridiculous thing. It's a nice shirt.
Thank you.
So, I guess better warm up because I haven't warmed up. And so ask me a question. Oh, Jeff, how do you warm up? Well, I'm just talking to myself, of course. You guys hear me back there?
Schitzel's not alone.
Yeah, the album is called Schizos, or the song Schizos, but everybody says Shitsos, which is right, you know. And just like Annihilator, I say in Canada, Annihilator, but everybody goes, Annihilator! And then there's Annihilator. Anyway, I gave up. Megadeth would have been easier to be a better name. So in concerts, when we tour and we play, I always have to say, after the first or second song, when we stop playing, I have to say, hi, some of you know we're from Canada, and of course, the name of the band is blah, 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 blah. And I have to say that Annihilator thing, because if I don't, the whole concert, people go, Annihilator! Okay, enough. Okay, that. And we have some very famous songs. One's called Chicken and Corn. Has anybody heard that? I wrote a song for my little baby son, and I was a single father because when my son was born in 1995, I was married, cars, studio, house, and my wife died of cancer right after. So while I was on my biggest records called King of the Kill and some other ones, I was a single father with a little kid. And my family flew out to where I lived to take care of my son. And what I would do is, when he was a little baby, I'd put him in my studio, and I'd keep the sound very quiet. And I would look at him, and I was trying to write, thrash metal songs. But I'd be looking at this little kid, and I'd be like, I would do things like, I'm supposed to be writing Slayer, Metallica, Priest kind of stuff, and I'm going, chicken corn, chick. Then I write songs about food and silly things, but my brain is all over the place, as you can see. I'm going to keep going everywhere. So I was lucky about 10, 11 years ago. My tour agent called and said, Jeff, I have some good news for you. We have a tour offer for you in Sofia, Bulgaria, with one of your favorite bands. And I said, whoa, that's awesome. Okay, who is it? Van Halen? No. Slayer? Yes. I was like, Slayer? And he goes, the good news is, they're playing, they're the headliner, but Annihilator is also the headliner. So I was like, you mean co-headlining? It only happened once. It must have been a mistake. Somebody did something wrong. So I remember that really, really well because I've met the Slayer guys many times before, and especially Gary Holt, who was with Slayer then, freshly new with Slayer. And Gary came to the dressing room and said, Jeff, my guitars didn't get here, so can I use your guitars? And I'm like, charged my phone right away for the photos. So that was really cool, but we were all very nervous because everybody knows that if you play after Slayer, you're fucked. If you play before Slayer, people will usually be like, Slayer, Slayer. So my singer at the time, Dave Patton, before the show, and I were talking, and I said, I was a little sweating and shaking, I said, let's not do the song Chicken and Corn, please. And Dave goes, no, we have to play that. He said, I'm not going to fucking stand on this stage with these people before Slayer with Gary Holt and Kerry King sitting there going like this and go, you know what I've been playing with, man. Chick, 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 chicken and corn. I love chicken and corn. Yeah. Anyway, I'm turning red. I'm embarrassed. But I like the color red, by the way. So I am turning red. Right? I can feel it in my hand. So he said, no way we're playing Chicken and Corn. So we go on stage, we're going, Alice in Hell, and Schmear from Destruction came up and played Alice in Hell with us and sang. We played a song called King of the Kill, Set the World on Fire, all the sort of popular songs for us. And then the part came up to Chicken and Corn. Paul Bostoff, Tom Array, Kerry King, Gary Holt. And they didn't know what we were going to do. So we started our Chicken and Corn song. And we had 20, 30,000, I don't know how many people were there. The entire crowd was singing, chick, 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 chick. I looked over and Gary Holt went. It was the best, one of the best experiences ever. So, how do I warm up? Okay, I'm not even going to touch my guitar. Thank you for asking the question, whoever he asked the question. Way back when I was a kid in Ottawa, teenager, my favorite guitar player was and still is Eddie Van Halen. And there was no internet, of course, and when us guitar players and bass players, keyboard players, drummers, everybody would line up in bookstores and magazine shops to buy the new magazine like Guitar Player or Guitar World. Whenever there was an interview with Eddie Van Halen, the whole world lined up to buy the magazines because he was the most, he actually was. I know there's Page and Hendrix and that, but for the masses, he was the most sort of public, most influential guitar player. So people would line up at bookstores at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning to buy magazines with his interview. He didn't do very many interviews, so back in the early 80s, I skipped, I didn't go to school that morning. I waited in lineup to get the magazine because the magazine said, in the previous magazine, it said, Eddie Van Halen, next issue, is going to teach you tell you all the secrets about the sound and the warm-up. And I thought, that's what I need to know. I need to know, how does he warm up? Like, that was my main thing. So I waited in line, skipped school, finally got the magazine about 9:30 in the morning. I came out with my magazine, and I sat outside at a bus stop, and I skipped through everything to find the warm-up. And it was 2 sentences. It said, when I'm in the dressing room, rehearsing or warming up for stadiums or clubs or whatever, or if I'm in the studio, I play AC/DC. I was like, what the fuck? And that was the entire reason to skip school and wait in a line. So that's right, I sort of just do that. I just play like, I'll go. You know that song? Anyone? That's too loud. Yeah. Anybody got the new Priest album? It's awesome, right? Yeah, it's amazing. I taught them everything we knew. No. That was good for us. Judas Priest was a big influence on my life with music, but also they took us out on tour. Some of you know this that know me, because I always talk about it because it's one of the biggest things I've ever done. Is 1990 they had that great album Painkiller, and that was probably the biggest touring they ever did and the biggest tour for sure. And to me was a real good sign of how an older band can put out 13 records, and all of a sudden the 14th record becomes the 14th record becomes this groundbreaking, new, gigantic, amazing record. And also taught me something that Glenn Tipton, one of the guitar players, they got Scott Travis, drummer, on Painkiller, and everybody knows the big famous drum intro. But it was really cool to find out that a guitar player like Glenn Tipton, who has his own style and is a legend, and he plays rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and writes songs like nobody else. As a guitarist, he changed everything about his lead guitar playing when Scott Travis joined the band. Because Scott Travis said, Glenn, you have to hear my friend in my other band called Paul Gilbert. So Glenn Tipton heard Paul Gilbert, and I don't know what year it was. And if you listen to his solos on Painkiller, it's Glenn Tipton turning to Paul Gilbert. So that taught me actually a lot too, that as an artist and a musician, you can be a legend and then completely get influenced by a younger guitar player. And Glenn probably sat in his room, his bedroom or his living room or his jam room and spent hours and hours and hours for at least a year or so learning this from somebody else younger. So that was a really cool thing. They brought us on tour. We did maybe 2 or 3 months with them in Europe, which is a long tour. And there was an opening act that nobody knew, almost nobody had heard of. And they would go on stage and play 30 minutes. We had a big album called Never Neverland, so we were like a already well-known band. And then, of course, Judas Priest. So we got to play an hour, a long set, and this opener from the United States was opening. And they said, we have to share the tour bus with these guys, but they like to party, so be ready. And I'm like, oh shit, because we like to party too. I drank a lot. But, you know, we were like, I don't know who these guys are, but. So the first show, second show, we see these guys. The drummers got this really cool Alex Van Halen shuffle drum groove. The guitar players totally, Randy Rhoads, Eddie Van Halen, Jakey Lee, made a lot of squeals and noises and crazy sounds like Eddie Van Halen would, and so I was like, wow, this guy's good. The singer though, very quickly into the tour, the singer was the problem for me or for other people and the fans. The singer would go on stage and with beers, which is okay, but he'd get angry at the crowd a lot because the crowd was not reacting sometimes, and they were just like, priest, priest, or Addison Hill, and which was cool. That's my song. But when the singer didn't get the reaction from the crowd, he would take a beer and throw it at the crowd and go, fuck you. And we were like, ooh. Like, to us, you don't insult the 80s heavy metal crowd like this. And he was wearing shorts and cut his hair and tattoos. And he looked like Henry Rollins, like the Dead Kennedys, Jello Biafra, which I like. I love Dead Kennedys and punk stuff. But he just didn't do that. So Annihilated, we would be on the bus or in our dressing room going, wow, these guys are so talented. But man, they're not going to get anywhere, nowhere. And then a year later, a few months in, they got kicked off the tour because they'd walk off stage after 5 songs if they didn't like the crowd reaction. And then we would go, oh, that's so bad. And we'd walk on stage and go, don't worry, we're here to save you all. 1 year later, Pantera became one of the biggest bands in the world. So I learned, it doesn't, and they were great, they were amazing band. We knew this, and we liked the songs, and we knew the songs right away. When they played them the next night and the next night, it was like, fuck, these are good songs. But they're never gonna get anywhere because of that attitude. So I learned something very important. It doesn't matter if it's in a little bar, a little club. It doesn't matter who it is. As a musician and business weirdo, you never judge anyone. Because everybody was wrong. The only person that was right was Rob Halford. He's the only person on that whole tour, including the other guys at Judas Priest, who saw what Pantera was going to become. And he brought Pantera on the tour, and Glenn Tipton brought Annihilated on the tour. So anyway, that was really cool. They became the biggest band in the world. I went into rehab, got kicked out of my apartment, my girlfriend, and lost my record deal right after the tour. So anyway, it's interesting lesson, right? Amazing. What else? Oh, yeah, good training going on here, right? I don't want to waste my batteries. I need them for when I get home. Any other questions, or do I just keep babbling? Yeah.
Just the questions.
Good, I like questions.
Yeah. The last few albums were a lot of samples on the drums, or even over superior?
No, it wasn't real drums.
Yeah.
It was, like you said, it was Metal Foundry, a company called Tune Tracks.
Yeah.
And a lot of the, especially the faster, let's say from death metal to a lot of the speed metal, a lot of technical stuff is done many different ways. To use a drummer almost always means you have to have a really good drummer, because you just can't be a good drummer live. You have to, the studio is a completely different thing. Then you have to, usually you have to find, if you want good drums, real drums, you have to find a studio and get a deal. And usually for a record, the average time you need is a really good drummer that's very prepared for a month before you go in the studio, and he has to be good. You've got to go in for a week. The minimum is a week, so you need money for the studio, and then every engineer in the studios says, oh yes, I can make drum sounds. But maybe 2% of those engineers know how to make a really good drum sound. So that means you have to pay a lot of money to get that 2% engineer into the studio. So now your whole recording budget for a lot of independent metal bands goes to recording the drum tracks. It's gone.
I think
You don't want to hear the answer, you just want to keep on.
I think just a not so good drum track, even if it's real,
Yeah.
is better than every electronical.
Yeah, but if you're doing this like I am for the money, you need to save the money.
Yeah, but you care for the music.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And even our drummer Fabio, who's a fantastic drummer, he's a great drummer. He's going to be leaving my band probably, I'm guessing, in a couple of years for a much bigger band. I know this is going to happen. It happens with most of my musicians. Mike Mangini left my band to join. I think Nuno Betancourt came up and said, I think I knew already what Nuno Betancourt was going to say when he saw Mike Mangini. I was like, I guess Mike's gone. And he was gone right away. But he was going to ask me, which was very professional. But and then, of course, he went on to play with Steve Vai and now Dream Theater. So a lot of musicians, because I hire my musicians, I don't really have a band. It's more of a solo project. But our drummer, for example, even he said, I don't know if I'm ready to go in the studio, but if you see him live, he's amazing. He's amazing. He's got a couple of years to learn more of the studio stuff. Thank you, thank you. Go ahead.
How did you find your drummer?
He sent a YouTube link to my Facebook account. He said, here's me playing the song Set the World on Fire and another song called No Way Out. And the drummer I had at the time had a baby, a child, which nothing wrong with that. I had a child and I was able to tour and make music my life. But he was more wanting to be at home and not really practicing very much. So I saw this kid that was completely 100% energy and really wanted it. So I made the switch then. And I took a chance on him. Didn't even audition him. He just sent me 2 videos and I said, do you have a passport? Do you have a criminal record? Do you do drugs? No, yes. And I think very shortly after we flew in for our first rehearsals. And I think one of the first shows was a Bang Your Head festival. So this kid who had played clubs or on a weekend on Battle of the Bands, drum things, went to Bang Your Head, Wacken Festival, a lot of the big festivals, and I would be playing, and I would be like I'd see him, he's like, but very quickly, he loves being here and on tour because he gets to meet most of his favorite drummers and favorite bands, and it's cool for me. He's like, we had an third album called Set the World on Fire, and he wasn't born yet, so we call him Baby Fabio.
Next record as well by yourself, or?
Unfortunately, yes. No. I sang on 3 Annihilated CDs in the 90s, and we were one of these freaky bands where I don't think there's any other heavy metal or thrash metal band that's done this. We had our first 4 CDs, had 4 different lineups, 4 different singers, and 4 different styles of metal music. The first album, Mouse in Hell, was more of a thrash metal, speed metal kind of thing. But it started with a song called Crystal Land. It was a classical guitar. thing, but it was a speed metal record. The second album, Never Neverland, which was our biggest one, was more speed, melodic kind of stuff. The third album, Set the World on Fire, was more like a commercial hard rock heavy metal album. The fourth one, called King of the Kill, was a traditional 80s Maiden, Priest heavy metal record. So somehow, in different parts of the world, all 4 albums were very successful, and I don't think anybody's ever done that. We never reached a big famous and huge band, but we've always been kind of in the middle, surviving, you know, so pretty well, yeah. It's great, it's a good life. It's also good because you don't go like this and get too crazy with your ego and with your partying and, you know.
Can you tell us something about your song writing routine? How do you start the song?
Well, for songwriting in general, for me, is difficult because I'm kind of the main guy, the main songwriter. Sometimes I'll bring other people in to co-write, but generally I've probably written 95% of everything on the albums, and in the beginning that was good. As time goes on, there's 2 things that really fuck that up, which is, first of all, I'm a fan of all different kinds of music in metal, so when I write songs or write riffs, a lot of times I'll be in my studio by myself writing a riff, and there's always somebody at my house. I don't know why, but there's always somebody upstairs walking around. I don't know why, but so I'm writing, and if I get something that I'm really excited about, like I can remember one time for sure, it happened 100 times, but I was writing a riff, and it was a little bit, it was like a speed thrash metal riff that from the old days. So I yelled up, and it was our singer at the time, Dave Padden. I pressed the button and said, "Dave, get down here. You got to come down and hear this riff." So he came down to the studio, and I said, he goes, "Okay, play it." And I'm like, and he stops and he goes, "That's the 3rd song off Rain in Blood by Slayer." Right? So that's the hardest part for me, is to get rid of the influences of my favorite bands. The last CD we did, called For the Demented, was a little more original, back to sort of Annihilated's more original, earlier style. But the CD in 2015, called Suicide Society, that was a fan record. That was my record where I would write a riff that sounds a lot like Master of Puppets style. It was not as good, but it was just in that feeling. Or there was an Iron Maiden part, even a Rammstein part, which is weird because I don't have that in my music, but one song was very close. Instead of hitting delete, when I knew it sounded like this, I said, "Fuck it, just do it." So I did that, and when the record was going to be released, should get some water. One second. When the CD was going to be released a couple of days before, I really was stressed out because I thought, oh no, like, I really screwed this one up. It's going to come out in the press, and fans are going to say, "That sounds like Metallica. That sounds like Megadeth." That was a big one, Megadeth. And it came out and it sold better than the other ones. I'm like, how? So, but I'm not doing that again. I'm going to, the last album was more original. It's also difficult when you're the only person and you can repeat yourself and write the same kind of riffs. And also songwriters, sometimes they write very good songs, and sometimes you can't help it. It's like your baby. You think it's really good when you make the song, but you don't know until maybe 1 year later. And a lot of musicians will always say, well, some musicians will say, "Oh, everything I've done is great, and I'm so good, and everything I do is great." I always give it maybe 6 months, and then I rate my albums from 1 to 10. So I look back and I say, okay, the album, the second one, Never Neverland, was a 9. You know, and one called Schizo Deluxe was an 8.9. You know, and so I rate them. And I rated that Suicide Society album 6.3. You know, like, so I try to be honest about it and try on the next record to just write better. But if there was a pill or a drug you could take to have Back in Black and, you know, Defenders of the Faith and Number of the Beast, I mean, all bands would be having the best albums every time, right? So, did I even answer that? I didn't. You want to know how I...
Yeah, do you use start?
He's like, that's not my question.
Do you start from progressions or do you start from riffs?
Yeah, it's just guitar riffs. And if it's, what I tried to do last album, and I'm going to do this time again, is use this. Because I've had a studio for 24 years. And it's easy to go in there and turn the power on and sit there with all this equipment, plug-ins, equipments, guitars, amplifiers, everything. And you sit there and you really, I try to work 9 to 5, like a real job. In my brain, I try to make it a job. And it's very easy to spend 20 minutes on writing a riff, and the rest is playing with all these different preamps, compressors, microphones, amplifiers, you know. So that is the worst thing for me is, and I love doing it. I need another cigarette. I love doing, working in the studio. It's like a hobby. I love doing it. So what I did last album and this one is I just sit there with an old 10-year-old little, you know, the little voice recorders, just when you want to make notes and talk, you turn it on. And so I just put it in front of this little amp and I just sit in the living room and write sort of the new riff I have. The last one I wrote before I got here on the tour bus recently was this one. Oh, you like it already?
Great.
Thank you.
Bit faster, maybe.
No, this is my speed right here. It's how I wrote it. And I was thinking using a big bell on stage before we play it.
Which direction your next record will be?
Hopefully up. What direction is my album going to be next time? Up! I think, well, we just did our third tour with Testament. And live Testament are fantastic. They have, I guess, when you're standing at the side of the stage or jamming with them in dressing rooms or just hanging out with them, you forget that that's Steve DiGiorgio on bass from Death and from, you know, the things he's done and plays are amazing. You've got Eric, the guitar player, the only not tall guy in Testament. Eric is one of the most underrated rhythm riff writers. His riffs are just amazing, but of course, the genius Alex Skolnick is the one that most people know. But I'm an Eric guy. But watching Alex Skolnick and then Gene Hoglan on drums. I mean, what can you say, right? Dark Angel, everything. So, as musicians, when you do a tour like this, and of course, Chuck Berry on vocals. Do you have that? You got that? It's like a big cuddly bear. He's a super. Some of you that have met him know this, but he's like, you know, the front man for Testament. He's this tall, and you know, if you see him on stage, he's smiling, looks friendly, but you know he's badass and he could just crush you like a bug. But we've known him since 1989. Our first tour was with Testament in the United States, in Canada, and they taught me everything, like how to put on a condom. That's disgusting, but it was very important in life. I learned my lesson not in school, not from my mother, not from my father. No, Louis Clemente, the drummer. I won't even get into how he knew I wasn't wearing one, but let's just leave it at that. But they taught, look, you needed to know this. He liked that one. He laughed at that one. Yeah. But yeah, they taught me how a professional crew works and how, you know, you be off stage when that clock says 0, you get the fuck off the stage. And he taught me how this schedules, and they taught me a little bit about tour finances and merchandise and things. And another funny story about the first tour with Testament was, the first shows with Annihilated, we would go on stage, and in the dressing room, I didn't understand that I should buy a guitar tuner. We didn't have a guitar tech. So we're on this massive Practice What You Preach, Alice in Hell, North American tour for 3 months. And nobody told me that you need a guitar tuner. So what I did in the studio for Alice in Hell was I tuned my guitar by ear. Yeah, that song. I would listen to it and tune to that. Nobody told me in the studio you need a tuner. They just didn't know. Because they knew our album was Alice in Hell, and the engineer did pop music, so he was scared to tell me, I guess. And so when we went on the first tour with Testament, they had these big racks of equipment, expensive guitar technicians. Everybody had their own tech. They had assistants, they had tour managers, assistant tour managers, lighting assistants, all these crew. We had one person, sound man. So before every show, we would go in our dressing room, and I'd say the bass player and the guitar, give me your guitars. And we didn't have backup guitars. We just had one. So if we broke a string, we would be completely finished the show. So I'd have to run to the dressing room and put the string on. We never broke a string. But before every show, in the dressing room, I would go, and then the other guy would go. This would take 20 minutes. And as soon as you leave the dressing room, the temperature changes. So you're all completely out of tune. So we would go on stage. The first 2 shows with Testament, after the second song, through the PA system, we got like 2,000 metalheads going, what the fuck are these guys doing? So after the second show, one of the guitar techs, I think maybe Eric's guitar tech, Eric was I think it was Eric, was very angry that he would sit in the dressing room and listen to. So they gave us our first tuner. And then I sat in the dressing room and I brought it on stage, and once our bass player was out of tune on stage, so we had to stop the show, he had to unplug his cable, and go and plug into my tuner, tune, unplug, and then we start the song. But anyway, so that first Testament tour was fun. What the fuck was I saying? I don't know what I was saying. So we just came back from our third tour with Testament. We did 2 tours in 5 months now, and we're talking about doing some more shows soon. And yeah, I don't even know what I'm talking about yet. Again?
Yeah, it's your next record.
Oh, sorry, that was first.
On your recent album, there was a song called Altering the Altar, which I really love, and it's a lot more technical than the rest of the album.
Yeah, some people were saying, why don't you do more songs like that?
Yeah, I was just asking.
I like the easy songs. You know, I'm getting older, and it's just you sweat too much, and it's. No, I think.
A little more on the next
Yes,
album.
I think
Pretty cool.
that's what's going to happen. Yeah, because you put a record out, and you know, again, we're not a huge band, but we do pretty well, and we talk to our fans on Facebook. I'm on Facebook all the time, and I talk to people at shows all the time. And musicians that I know in other bands, they always say the same thing. They say, why don't you do more songs like this? So I think I'm going to do that. Yeah, a little more technical and crazy
Are you
stuff.
playing this song tonight? Maybe?
Here?
Yeah.
No, I do the easy ones. Like, seriously, I can Set the World on Fire. You ready for this?
Nice.
Guitar players, watch this. This is called Set the World on Fire. You'll learn a lot from this. Ready? There we go. And he does that about 1 minute for the whole song. But that's another thing is when I made the switch as a young teenager from heavy metal, which was Scorpions, Loudness, Kiss, AC/DC, Van Halen, those bands, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne. Then a friend of mine came over and said, hey, you have to check out this new album. It's awesome. It was early 80s, I think. And he brought this cover in, and it had like goats' heads and crosses upside down or something, satanic stuff. I'd never seen that stuff before. And I go, who's this? Holy shit, look at this. What do they sound like? Who is it? Venom. And as soon as I heard Venom, something happened. Then the same day or the next day, he brought me Haunting the Chapel by Slayer. It was an EP. And I saw that cover, Show No Mercy, and all these horrible covers. I asked to borrow the records, and my mother threw them out. My mother actually threw my friend's records in the garbage, and she wouldn't give them back, and she wouldn't pay. If you bring that filth in the house, you know. Now my mother flies to the shows and watches the shows, and she tells everybody on her Facebook page how proud she is of her son. But that was the question. Yeah. So one of the first songs I heard, beside a couple of Venom songs, was Chemical Warfare. And that's another one-note song at the beginning. And that was, I couldn't play it because I was more a left-hand Matthias Yabs with Scorpions and you know, melodic stuff and Priest and that. And I never heard this picking stuff. And Chemical Warfare by Slayer, this is a good one to practice for picking, is it goes like this, it goes. Can you even hear that back there? The power of Black Star. So that riff goes, it goes for a minute or 2 minutes, and then the band builds, Dave Lombardo comes in with his drums. And I couldn't play that. I could play some cool solos, but I couldn't, how do you pick like this? So I literally spent a year after hearing that record in my room, no girlfriends, no cigarettes, no beer, just me alone in my bedroom with my right hand, going, right, and then a year later, right, and then fast, I won't do the fast one in case I make a mistake, but then I just went faster and faster for that. And that's, I don't even know where I was going with that. I have no idea, but Set the World on Fire. That's kind of the same thing, but a lazy Jeff Waters. It's a good one to play in a festival, because even if you don't know the song, your head goes like this and people like it. Thank you very much. Thank you. But that song actually was, I should have been sued for that, because in 1992 there was a video game by Nintendo, I think it was Nintendo, Super Mario 3. And I had made my first try to quit drinking alcohol, because this was right after the Pantera Judas Priest tour. And when I came back from that tour, I realized I was a full-blown alcoholic. So I quit. I quit that first time. I quit 2 times. I haven't had a drink in almost 20 years. I'm coming up to 20 years now without any alcohol. So it's like, yeah, 1 clap. Thank you. Now you're my best friend. Yeah. So, thank you. What was I going to say though? So I was trying to withdraw from alcohol. I didn't know what withdrawal was, but I knew I was feeling like shit, and I was shaking, and my heart was flying, and I thought, oh wow, I'm really stressed out. I better buy a video game. So I went and I bought a video game, and I would eat 6 or 12 donuts, raspberry donuts every day. I gained about 40 pounds. Because I didn't understand what was happening, because I was going through withdrawal. For 4 years, I drank an average of 13 or 14 to 20 double rum and cokes every single night. So the rum is bad enough, but imagine drinking really bottles of Coca-Cola every night, plus the alcohol. So my stomach was destroyed at that point. So I quit. I realized, wow, I have to stop this. And I got through it by playing Super Mario 3 for 2 months when it came out. And back then, without the internet, you could, when you get to a level, I was doing this 15 hours a day. I was playing, and then I was so tired I'd just sleep and wake up, have breakfast and donuts, and playing. So there was a telephone line you could call in Seattle, Washington, where Nintendo was based, for $2 a minute, and they would help you get through the level. So, all by myself, playing Nintendo for 2 months, eating donuts, getting really fat. And at the end, the last level of Super Mario 3, there's one little section of that one level that goes. I changed one little tuk-tuk. That was it. You can't sue me now, it's too late. But so that, yeah, that was a complete ripped-off thing. So Super Mario 3 made that riff. And that was our 3rd album. That was the first song, first video, and it was the number 4 album in Japan. Thanks to Nintendo. Yeah. Okay, questions? Yep. Oh, yes! Yes.
Jeff, tell us something please about your new guitar effect.
Effect?
The processor, however it's called. Line 6? Are you
Yes, it's mine. I own the company.
Are you all the time?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not here, is it? Over the years, you know, in the older days, I'd have JCM 800s, and the other guitar player would have JCM 800 Marshall amplifiers. So we need 4 of them, 1 for a backup. So to fly that from and I wasn't taking care of business, a manager did this, so I didn't care about money. I said, I don't care what it costs, you have to send our amplifiers. So at the end of one of the tours for Never Neverland, I said, well, you know, I have no money. They gave me an allowance. Roadrunner Records and manager gave me 2,000 Canadian dollars, about like 1,300 euro or something every month, and I was rich. That was like, I was set for life for that money, because I had a little one-bedroom apartment, and I didn't eat much food. Actually, strippers bought me beer, so that was cool. I didn't have to pay for money, and cigarettes. Did I just say that? Strippers bought me beer and cigarettes, okay? Because they like musicians. So anyway, it was a long time ago in my youth. So what the hell was, yeah, so at the end of one of the big tours, I noticed there was so many shirts, and I didn't know how much money was coming in. I knew nothing about the business whatsoever. And I said, could I get a little more, like maybe $2,300? No, you can't. He showed me some paperwork, and for the festivals and the tour we just did, it cost $12,000 US to fly those fucking amplifiers around the world. 12,000. So from then on, no, I kept drinking for a few more years and didn't care about it. But then I quit drinking December 31st, 1999 for good. And I had a lot of time on my hands, I know this, I'm gonna answer that question. I had a lot of time to do a lot of things, because what do you do when you spend your nights drinking? What do you do when you're not? And in the daytime, you would sleep, you know, you feel kind of sick, and now I had the day and night to do something. I went to the manager's office and I saw a piece of paper that said that for one of our tours we just did, he received $85,000 US just as an advance for t-shirts for the new tour coming up. And I was like, wait a minute, that's $100,000 in Canadian money, which is a lot of money. And where is that money going? And that was the beginning of me sobering up, firing my manager, getting rid of all the record publisher, everything. I got rid of everything, because that's when I woke up and said, publisher, merchandiser, manager, record, everybody's ripping me off. So I was lucky that I got out of all those deals. Most bands are finished when they sign those deals. So from then on, my whole goal in this was to run it like a business and learn about the business. I had no schooling, no real education. But when I had lots of time, I spent all my time learning about the business. Not to make money and have fancy cars, which I have, but that's not why I did it. It was because I wanted to be able to, you know, if I'm working hard at something, why is everybody else getting the money, right? And then it happens to all my friends' bands. They were all signed to bad record deals, and they all had no money, but they were famous. So I was always about hopefully working with honest people and companies, and because 95% of them are not honest. They are there to make money for themselves, and they can give the artist money so they get drunk or do coke or smoke or whatever they do. Keep them busy, yeah, here's some money, go on tour for 2 years. Keep pushing them out there. Meanwhile, they're making the money off you. And I was shocked at that. So ever since then, I've been trying to find ways to save money and make money. And one of the ways to save money was not spend $12,000 US shipping Marshall amplifiers around the world. Eventually, over the decades, it went to Hughes and Kettner core blade amplifiers, which were computer and tube amps, but they had built-in effects pedals like reverb, delay, all these effect things. And because of that, you didn't have to carry around racks of equipment, all this, you know, effects in another box and pay more money. Then Hughes and Kettner made an amplifier this big called Grandmeister. And that was the same thing but smaller. And now we can put our amplifiers in suitcases. But it still cost me an extra €1,000 to have the extra suitcases for me and the guitar player. It went so far as to when Line 6 came out with the Helix, which is, they have different types, but the Helix LT is a little floorboard, just a little pedal board. You can pick it up with one hand, and you don't need anything, nothing. And it's so light that what I do is I make my guitar tech put my backup one in his suitcase and wrap clothes around it. And I put mine in my suitcase and I wrap my clothes around it. and it costs zero. So you imagine going for 12,000. And if we did festivals, if we do 12 festivals in Europe, you have to fly to every festival. That would be about 12,000 euros, for sure, to fly all this amplifiers everywhere. And that. So now, when we did our Testament tour last October, Alex Skolnick and Eric had the best guitar techs. They had all these Kemper amplifiers, backup Kemper amplifiers, big racks of equipment, fancy MIDI pedal boards, just everything you could dream about as a guitarist. And we all flew into Gothenburg, I think it was, and hung out, partied, had dinner. We get to the show. All right, Annihilated, do sound check. Take as long as you need. They're really cool. Do your sound check. So Alex and Eric were like, hey Waters, what guitar rigs are you using on this tour? And I said, I'll show you, hang on. So we're about to sound check. And I said, hang on a second. And my guitar tech, Andrew, he said, Andrew, you want to hook up the rig here? I want to show Alex and Eric. And he comes out with one hand, puts it on the floor, 2 cables. One goes into my guitar, or my wireless pedal, and one goes into the Helix, and it goes right to the PA system and the monitors. And Eric, and the 2 guitar techs, Eric and Alex, are going, where the fuck is your amplifier and your speaker cabinet? There was nothing, there's a drum kit. Poor little Fabio's waiting to play. And there's nothing there. And because, you know those, the backdrops on the sides? You don't put those up for sound check, you put them up just before the show. So if you take those away, there's nothing except poor little Fabio and his drum kit, right? I hope he's not here. I love you, Fabio. So Alex Skolnick and the techs were like, what the fuck are you doing? This is cool. So we plug in, and I did this on purpose. Our sound man is also the sound man for Behemoth, Polish band Behemoth. Great band, great sound man. And we worked this out before the tour, that let's go in there, put the little boxes on the floor for the bass player, me, and the other guitarist. We all used the same little Helix. Let's go in there, plug in, and do our sound check in 6 minutes. They said we had 1 hour and a half to sound check. So let's do it in 6 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes to check, each of us. Plugged in, less than 2 minutes each. Bam, bam, bam. Sound man goes, okay, Jeff, that's good, thank you. Aaron, that's good. Rich, bass player, thanks, Rich, that's good. All right, high five, thank you, we're ready. So we walked off the stage and you see all these guys going, because they had to ship a container from from California, this massive container of equipment. And in that container were huge racks of guitar processors and Kempers and all these systems. And I was doing this because we always go back and forth and make jokes with Testament, and they make jokes of us, which is very easy. You know, my hair and my songs and the name of the band. So what happened after that? We watched Testament soundcheck, and it took 2 hours for Eric and Alex and their techs to try to get their Kempers to sound. I guess they were working on their guitar sound. So we were like, anyway, you know what that means. They thought we had a great sound, and the whole time we go to play festivals with these little things, and we get, like, I remember Alter Bridge. Mark Tremonti's a big hero of mine, like, for his sounds and his playing. So many different musicians and guitar players, and especially guitar techs, will see us and go, oh, let's see what Waters is doing, or Jeff Waters is supposed to be a good guitar player, and we need a guitar tech, so let's see if Jeff's tech's good and we'll steal him. or drummers, or musicians. So a lot of these famous musicians and techs would come up to see us play it, and they would do the same thing as Testament did. They go, what the fuck is he using? There's nothing here. Do you use in-ear monitors? No. Nothing. Anyway, so we would always, and our sound's pretty good live, like our guitar sounds pretty good. So we're changing the industry, band by band. With Testament, with jokes, the joke was, Chuck, I think it was Chuck called me up, or I talked to him. I saw him somewhere at a show or a festival, and Eric too. Eric was a big help to get us on that tour. But Chuck said, hey, Jeff, you ready for the Testicle Annihilated tour? And I'm like, Chuck, you never joke about your band. You always make fun of us, but you never, he's a very friendly guy, but he's very serious about the band. Like, make no mistake, this Testament is, it's Eric's vision musically mostly, but Chuck is the driving force, right? It's his thing. He's the one walking around in sound check, making sure everything is right. And he's doing the business with his wife. So I couldn't believe he said Testicle Annihilated tour. So at the end of the first tour, in November or December, we played the last show in Holland. And we went on stage and people were, I lost my voice in the very last couple of last songs of the last show. It just stopped because I was smoking too much. And when you think, oh, we only have 3 more shows, then you start like staying up and yelling and not going to sleep very much and whatever. So we're playing and everything, and my voice starts going really quickly, but people were laughing for many songs. They were just laughing, and I'm like, what's going on? Is it my hair, or is it just something going on? Do I have something in my nose hanging out, or something gross? And then I looked around and it said Anal Eater on our backdrop. So we did the show as Anal Eater. The last tour we did, we finished last week. And our last show was in London at this beautiful, it looked like an Asian British theater called Coco Theater, I think, or something like Coco or whatever. Beautiful place, sold out. Did I say sold out? Yeah, okay, anyway. What we did was we took our backdrop and flipped it around, and on the back, it's, we put black, it was a white, just nothing but white on the back. For the last show, Testament does this thing where they have a big backdrop, and then at one point, 2 roadies run in with a rope. Ready? And then they counting, and all of a sudden, they pull the rope, and the big backdrop falls down, and there's a big Testament logo. We put Testicle on our backdrop, put it up there, so when they went, Testicle was up there. So I remember Chuck went running right through the curtain when he saw it. I went, fuck you, Waters. And I honestly thought he was really angry. He looked like he was, so I stayed backstage a little bit and watched them from behind near the emergency exit door. And then afterwards he came up and went, nice one. So I was that's good. Oh, I made friends with his wife really good because I wanted her to say, Jeff, he's so cute and such a nice guy, don't hurt him. What time is it? Anybody know the time? There's somebody else coming in right now, I think Bruce, so I got to know the time.
12.
Good enough?
No, 12.
2 minutes? 2:12.
2 minutes.
I think I got 1 minute. Wow, man, this is so good. I didn't really play anything. Yeah, go ahead.
How many times Dave must stand up for you?
3. Yeah, he's a great guy. Amazing.
Your soloing technique, bending, are you more a wrist guy or a finger strum guy? You know, do you more from a wrist for bending?
Oh, you mean this hand?
Yes. And do you palm mute with the index finger, you know?
I have no idea what that means. No, you said it in perfect English. I just don't even know what that means. Basically, this isn't going to answer your question, but I have to go because this awesome guy, Bruce, is coming in here right now. For my lead technique, this is the last thing. My lead technique is very simple. I took next generation blues, like the first guys were like B.B. King, Chuck Berry, and but I went for the other guys, Angus Young, who I think is one of the best blues solo players ever in history, and he's very underrated for that. I would take blues licks and go like this. This is what I would hear, like something like this. I'd hear. Something like that on some blues guy. I'm going to make faces, and I'm going to do the Michael Schenker sitting on the toilet pose for this one. Which I got to play with him, it was awesome. Not on the toilet. On a boat cruise, playing an AC/DC song. So I would take that lick, that shit, and I would just sit there in my room with my right hand for years and go. Anyway, that's my lead technique. I steal Angus Young and blues licks, do it fast, you have no idea, you think it's original, and you buy my records. Thank you!